The Colombian Congress began its legislative term 2022-2026 with a historic majority composed of alternative, progressive, and left-wing movements in both chambers. The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, leads an act on the occasion of the promulgation of the organic law of the special economic zones. Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi wins confidence vote in the upper house of Parliament on Wednesday. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Colombia, the Congress begins the legislative term 2022-2026 with a historic majority composed of alternative, progressive, and left-wing movements in both chambers. The ceremony makes official 285 members of the Congress, divided into 187 senators and 107 representatives to the chamber, of which the coalition of the Historical Pact will occupy the largest number of seats, which guarantees the support for the policies of President-elect Gustavo Petro. Senator Roy Barreras will preside over the parliamentary body during the next year, in which among the legislative priorities are the revision of the 2023 budget and the tax reform. In Puerto Rico, social organizations protest against the privatization of electric power, denouncing constant fee increases. Protesters, called by the Alliance of Active, Retired, and Mobilized Employees of the Electric Power Authority, are asking Governor Pierluisi to stipulate the approval of a new electrical debt adjustment plan. Among the conditions are no increase in the electricity rates for the payment of the debt, a cut of more than 75% in the bonded debt, as well as no cuts in pensions and no tax on the sun or renewable energy. We have more information. The indigenous movement of Panama began a national strike to demand the government the title of their lands, a call that comes in the middle of the progress of the talks at the single table of dialogue. The protesters demand an end to evictions by the settlers and the recognition of the development of the Mandugandi and Emberá de Alto Bayano, the territories recognized by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. These protests have the support of 12 congresses and the authorities of 7 native peoples. These protests are taking place at a time when the leaders of the popular and the union organizations are advancing in a unified dialogue table. According to the Archdiocese, the talks will be resumed on Wednesday to analyze the technical support to each of the issues prioritized during the first day of work established in Penonome in the province of Cocle.
The National Coordinator of the Indigenous Peoples, which brings together 7 indigenous peoples, 12 structures are calling this afternoon to announce the national strike in the territories at national level. This is because the coordinator has been calling the government to dialogue, to present the land problems that we have in the comarcas. However, they have paid little attention. Above all, the directors who are responsible for this solution have not shown up. They have always sent secretaries or low-level people who do not make the decisions.
The Haitian opposition called on the various sectors to reach an agreement to establish a transition of rupture to address the social crisis faced by the country. Economist Fritz John, elected by the signatories of the Montana Agreement to lead an interim executive, made an appeal to make the organization of elections viable and to take the measures to put an end to the violence resulting from the war between the gangs for control of Cid Solel in the capital. Other social sectors encourage an inclusive dialogue to discuss issues such as security, fight against corruption, and the election monitoring. In this context, the United Nations demanded that the armed groups cease fire and respect the right to life of the population. On Wednesday, the Bloc of Resistance and the People's Rebellion of El Salvador will present a petition for the abolition of the exception regime to the Legislative Assembly. The measure comes after the Salvadoran Congress approved during its plenary session the fourth extension that suspends several constitutional rights of the Salvadoran population, such as the right to defense. Meanwhile, leaders of the Popular Resistance Bloc assured that with this extension, fundamental rights recognized by the country's constitution, such as the right to life and the presumption of innocence, are violated. On the other hand, the government representatives stated that the emergency regime guarantees peace in the country. We move on now to other topics. The Democratic Labour Party today made official the presidential candidacy of Ciro Gomes, who has held political posts including finance minister in the government of Itamar Franco and the Minister of National Integration during the term of Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. With a discourse neither of the right nor of the left, he is trying to position himself as the third wave in an election between the governing Jair Bolsonaro and the former president Luis Inácio Lula da Silva. And the former Brazilian president, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, visited his hometown in the state of Pernambuco, where he talked with thousands of supporters. Our correspondent in Brazil, Brian Muir, with the details.
Brazil's former president Lula is leading in all polls for this year's presidential elections. This week he started a two-day tour of Pernambuco state, on the land he was born in outside of the hill town of Garanhuns, where his cousins have restored his mother's old house.
It's symbolically powerful for us that Lula is here near Grananas, interconnecting with his roots and his origins as a working-class man who came from Pernambuco in Northeast.
After visiting with dozens of his cousins, nieces and nephews, Lula went to an outdoor arena and addressed a crowd of thousands who'd come out to see their hometown's most famous former resident.
We face hardships as Northeasterners. We know the prejudice and xenophobia that we face. Lula is here today to show that he can make Brazil better, and we are hoping that our future President Lula will defend life and the working class.
With tens of millions of Brazilians now facing food insecurity due to the Bolsonaro administration's disastrous neoliberal economic policies, Lula took advantage of his short time back in the land of his childhood to remind everyone of the injustice of hunger.
How can some people have everything and others have nothing? How can one person have 10 pieces of bread a day and another person go 10 days without having a piece of bread? Why, in the country which is the world's largest producer of animal protein, do people have to go to the butchers and buy bones, chicken carcasses, chicken feet and chicken necks?
Former President Lula will spend Wednesday in pre-campaign events in Recife. Brian Muir, TeleSUR, Garanhuns.
Thank you, Brian, for this report, and we'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, leads an act on the occasion of the promulgation of the organic law of the special economic zones. The Venezuelan president points out that the laws must be activated with great political will. The law of special economic zones comes to build new territorial and regional engines in production and in function of the productive economy and to give confidence to investors coming from all over the world. The head of state also highlights that Venezuela resumes with a new impulse the path of the special economic zones for the development of the country at all the levels.
I'm sure that this law will build new territorial and regional engines in terms of the growth of the productive economy, of the growth of the real economy, in terms of providing special conditions for economic confidence to investors coming from all over the world. That is why we have invited all the members of the diplomatic corps.
California and Oregon states are calling on the U.S. federal government to declare a public emergency as a result of monkeypox outbreak in the country. Both states emphasize outreach strategies for communities most at risk, while the U.S. health officials announced on Friday that more than 100 doses of monkeypox vaccines are on the way to states. The government officials acknowledged that vaccine supply hasn't been keeping up with the demand seen in New York, California, and some other places. The states of New York, California, Florida, and Illinois are the hardest hit areas in the country, with more than 200 reported cases each as of July 20th. Monkeypox is endemic in parts of Africa and does not usually spread easily among people. But this year, more than 12,000 cases have been reported in countries that historically don't see the disease.
Is to make sure that we are through our budget process, getting funding for our local communities.
Today we're demanding a stronger action on monkeypox. The good news about monkeypox, is, if there is any at all, is that it is a familiar threat. We have tests and we have vaccines. Sadly, despite 2 years of experience with COVID, our response to monkeypox has been maddeningly slow. Therefore, I have sent a letter to Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra asking him to declare a public emergency on monkeypox.
The United States House of Representatives overwhelmingly approved a legislation to protect same-sex and interracial marriages. This move occurred amid concerns that the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade abortion access could jeopardize other rights, criticized by many conservative Americans. The vote was 267 over 157, with dozens of Republicans joining Democrats for a passage. With a lopsided debate, Democrats argued intensely in favor of enshrining marriage equality in federal law, while Republicans openly rejected gay marriage. They portrayed the bill as unnecessary amid other issues facing the nation. While the Respect for Marriage Act is expected to pass the House with a Democratic majority, it is almost certain to stall in the evenly split Senate, where most Republicans will likely join a filibuster to block it.
Of course, it's an election year. Congress is at stake this year. So with these votes, Congress is really trying to reassert its role, its legislative branch role, in sort of a confrontation with the Supreme Court. Later this week, there'll be a vote on ensuring access to contraceptive services. Again, this follows votes last week to ensure access to abortion services. These are ways that Congress is trying to pass bills and put in legislation to really sort of stand up and push back against what the court has already done with the Roe versus Wade ruling, and what others worry may still come if the court takes further action on some of these other issues.
Now we move on to other topics. Syrian government announced the termination of diplomatic relations with Ukraine in full exercise of the principle of reciprocity and in response to the decision of the Ukrainian government in this regard. Syrian Foreign Minister Faisal Mekdad stated that the decision is in response to the poor communication of the Ukrainian authorities with his government since 2018 regarding the refusal to renew the residency visas to the diplomatic staff of the Arab nation in Kiev. We recall that Ukraine broke off relations due to the Syrian recognition of the self-proclaimed republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi wins confidence vote in the upper house of Parliament on Wednesday. Draghi had asked the lawmakers to support the coalition government in an effort to avoid calling early elections. Of the 133 senators who participated in the vote, 95 were in favor of the government. The Prime Minister will attend a meeting of the lower house of the National Parliament on Thursday morning, where the question of confidence in the executive will also be discussed. It should be recalled that Draghi resigned last week, claiming the end of the national majority after the FTS did not participate in a confidence vote in the government. President Mattarella did not accept Draghi's resignation and invited him to report to the legislature on the current domestic political situation. Sri Lanka's parliament voted by secret ballot on Wednesday for a new president to lead the country out of the deep political, economic and humanitarian crisis that has left tensions in the island nation. Prime Minister and the acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who has been the face of the government's handling of the economic crisis, is facing a heavy challenge. Dolas Alaparuma, a former government minister, was nominated by a faction of the ruling coalition, and ethnic minority parties also said they'll support him. His opponent in the voting was the Marxist Party leader Anura Dissanayake. The winner will serve for the remainder of Gotabaya Rajapaksa's term that ends in 2024. The government of China rejected the visit of the Vice President of the European Parliament, Nicolas Beer, to Taiwan and called for a halt to any form of political exchange with the island. At a press conference, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin declared that the meeting of the European delegate with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen contributes to the deterioration of relations between Beijing and Europe, seriously violating the principle of one China, encouraging the island's pro-independence rebel forces. The official also stressed that the West must respect Beijing's sovereignty over the island and demand that the European nations not interfere in the internal affairs of the Asian giant. Now we move on to other topics. The people in Germany had the hottest day this year, as the highest temperature hit 40 degrees Celsius in some parts of the country. According to data released by the country's meteorological authorities on Wednesday, most regions of the country were scorched by a temperature of or above 35 degrees Celsius. In the southwestern and the western parts of the country, temperatures soared to 40 degrees Celsius. It was the second time that a heat wave affected Germany since mid-June. As the situation worsened, experts warned about the risk of a heat wave-triggered wildfires. As a result, the government authorities upgraded the wildfire alert to the highest level for most of its forests. A massive wildfire broke out in the region of Penteli in northern Athens on Wednesday, forcing hundreds to evacuate and leaving 3 injured. Local media reported the fire broke out after sunset and then spread to the northeastern suburbs of Athens. Of the 3 people injured in the fire, 2 of them suffered burns and 1 suffered breathing difficulties due to the smoke inhalation. They were all taken to hospital for treatment. More than 600 people have been evacuated so far, as many homes have been destroyed and the roads closed. TeleSUR English continues to grow. Its signal now reaches Europe. You can order it from your cable dealer or turn it yourself. These parameters that you see on screen are in place since July 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signals in the Middle East and Africa. Now more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are heard in other farther away nations. This news multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. So we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.